I've been working on it. Trying to with the big setup. Well, we are live. I hope you have been reading Revelation. We are in your workbook, page 23. I don't have any extra workbooks. Now, Mary, you got one, right? You asked last week. If there is a request, I'll have them printed for next week. So, okay. You know these people? Okay, yeah. Huh? We're kin. We're all related, right? Paul? Okay. Okay. We're glad to have you as our guest. Thank you for being here. We are in Revelation chapter 11. Now they'll get up and run, right? Okay. So am I. Revelation chapter 11. We have 3 chapters tonight to cover, 11, 12, 13. And we're on page 23 of your workbook that you have. And I always kind of like to start off. I'm not going to do the song tonight. I need to get with you, maybe have you or Matt get the slides ready for singing. Or do you want to sing along with the recorded music again? But we'll try that song. And I think there's some other songs. Matt's been showing me some songs that also go along with Revelation. So we'll try to... Why don't I make this assignment, if you don't mind, Matt? Won't you plan on leading one of those songs, maybe that Revelation song or another one, next Wednesday night? John, why don't you? You got 2 weeks. You want to lead the Revelation song next week, and Matt, you pick one of the other songs. How about that? We'll try it. All right. So I always like to start off with things to keep in mind as we kind of do a little review. Previous chapter 10, the last scene of that was where John is seeing an angel, that in this angel's right hand is a little book, a little scroll that's opened. And he is told to grab that scroll and to eat it. And at first it's sweet, but then it turns sour in the stomach. What do you believe that's to indicate to John about what happens further on? Sounds good to what? It sounds good at first, but then goes south. Is that kind of what you're saying? Okay. Yeah. This is going to be good stuff, but it's also going to be, I believe, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, okay? That's the way truth is a lot of times. Truth is sweet, but can truth hurt? Oh, the truth hurts, right? The truth will set you free, but also it cuts like a knife. I mean, to think of the John Bon Jovi song, it cuts like a knife. Is that a Bon Jovi song? That's not gonna. Anyway, it's going to have a challenge, and he is told that he's going to have to continue to prophesy to every tribe, language, and tongue, right? Or all the nations is what he's saying. There toward the end of chapter 10. Now, as we approach chapters 11, 12, and 13, and we've already seen things have started to get a little freaky, symbol-wise. We've seen a few now. This is really ramping up when we get to chapter 11 and chapter 12 and 13, and just wait till we get to 14. And it's probably within these chapters that I just listed where the majority of confusion and the variety of interpretation and the overwhelming nature of the book itself that causes people to be intimidated resides for the most part in those 4 chapters. But I want to remind you of something. I said it at the beginning. The blessing that's mentioned explicitly in the book, the blessing of reading it aloud and or hearing it read aloud, does not hinge on an interpretation view or a model of interpretation. So my first challenge to us has been what? Let's read it. Whatever's scary, let's just face it. We're going to face the giants or monsters, or in this part, dragons, a dragon. And let's just read it. And the blessing is that we read it. So in the understanding, that might come later, but I think to remind you of reading it in its entirety, the benefit is you get the whole picture without getting stuck in interpretation. So I think it's a mistake to lock in on an interpretation before the reading of the entire book. But this is the section where all these interpretations grow legs and go in various places. I will tease you a little bit tonight. I'm going to give you various interpretations to some of the symbols, but not all of them. And you're probably going to be disappointed that I might not touch on something that you brought with you as a question in your mind. However, there's time built in to this schedule at the end where I'm going to go back and I'm going to review the interpretation models once we've got it read and under our belt. So I don't want to lose the overall relevance to the original recipients or the application for us today. So with that said, let's go with chapter 11, The Plot Thickens. And as always, we start by reading Revelation 11. Here we go. Y'all excited about this? Who's scared? 3 people. Okay, here we go. I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, "Go and measure the temple of God and the altar with its worshipers, but exclude the outer court. Do not measure it because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months, and I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. They are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands, and they stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. They have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. They have a power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. Now when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. Their bodies will lie in public square of the great city, which is figuratively called Sodom in Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. The inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts, because these 2 prophets had tormented those who live on the earth. But after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck those who saw them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies looked on. At that very hour there was a severe earthquake, and a tenth of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the survivors were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe has passed. Remember, going back to the 3 woes, and we've had one reference, the first woe has passed. Now the second one has passed, right? And the third woe is coming soon. The 7th angel sounded his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven which said, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders who were seated on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God, saying, We give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, the one who is and who was, because you have taken your great power and have begun to reign. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants the prophets and your people who revere your name, both great and small, for destroying those who destroy the earth. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the ark of his covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm. All right? So John received a reed, a measuring rod, a stick of some sort that measures the temple. And the inhabitants of the temple, or the people that are inside the temple, represent God's people. He's not told to measure the outer court. That's the court of Gentiles. They will trample on the earth. We have basically what we saw earlier to determine who are God's people by those 144,000 that have the seal of God on their foreheads. It's again another way of saying, calculate those that are among my followers, my people. It's just another way of framing it. It's not an additional event going on. It's coming back again in a different cycle saying, who are my people? Designate, let's see who's in, who's out. The trampling on the holy city is for a period of 42 months. We'll come back to that in a second. We also have the reference of 1,260 days, right? And we also have a reference of, we'll get to it later, it's not in this chapter, time, times, and half a time. Jim Criswell, does this sound familiar? Y'all were in Daniel chapter 7, I believe, yesterday, right? In Daniel 7 and also in Daniel 12, I believe this reference is there. Do you realize that that basically is just different ways of saying the same amount of time? Y'all see that? A Hebrew month is on average 30 days. That's kind of on average what we have. 30-day months, 42 months, 1,260 days, time and a half a time. That's 3.5 years. That's 3.5 years right there. We'll get back to that in a minute because I think it might be helpful to in a future chapter to see what's going on there. But I just want you to see that timestamp. John was told that there would be 2 witnesses appointed to prophesy for the 1,260 days. That same time frame, not 42 months and then another 1,260 days, but just a different way of saying, during the time the holy city's getting trampled on, these 2 witnesses will be prophesying. The 2 witnesses are called 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord. This is based out of Zechariah 4. If you've got your Bibles, let's read Zechariah 4 for a moment and see if this sounds familiar. Zechariah 4, Old Testament. Zechariah 4, then the angel who talked with me returned and woke me up like someone awakened from sleep. He asked, "What do you see?" I answered, "I see a solid gold lampstand with a bowl at the top and 7 lamps on it with 7 channels to the lamps. Also there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right of the bowl, the other on its left." I asked the angel who talked with me, "What are these, my Lord?" He said, "Do you not know what these are?" "No, my Lord," I replied. So he said to me, "This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord Almighty. What are you, mighty mountain? Before Zerubbabel you will become level ground. then he will bring out the capstone, shouts of, God bless it, God bless it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this temple, and his hands will also complete it. You will know that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. Now Zerubbabel, by the way, is the first of the three that are restoring the city of Jerusalem and the walls. You got Zerubbabel, name the other two. Ezra and then Nehemiah. You read about Zerubbabel and Ezra in the book of Ezra. Nehemiah is about rebuilding the walls. This is a reference to the coming back and the restoration of Israel after having been in Babylonian exile. Verse 10, who dares despise the day of small things? I love that phrase in Scripture, who dares despise the day of small things? Since the seven eyes of the Lord that reigns throughout the earth will rejoice when they see the chosen capstone in the hand of Zerubbabel. That chosen capstone is a symbolic reference of when you're building and in construction, and this is what little of architecture I do remember when I was here, is that capstone is kind of the key thing that goes in and finishes off the arch or the construction. It's the final thing to be set in place, the finishing or the completion of a project. Verse 11, then I asked the angel, what are these two olive trees on the right and the left of the lampstand? Again, I asked him, what are these two olive branches beside the two gold pipes that pour out golden oil? He replied, do you not know what these are? No, my Lord. Verse 14, so he said, these are the two who are anointed to serve the Lord of all the earth. We'll come back to that in a moment, but how similar does that sound to what we just read in Revelation chapter 11? This is a word image that has been used before, hasn't it? The two witnesses would protect themselves with fire coming from their mouths, killing anyone who would try to harm them. They also had the power to prevent rain, turn waters into blood, and to use every kind of plague as often as they want. Verse 6. When they finish, the beast comes up from the abyss. That beast will kill them. Their bodies will be put out in public display in the square of that great city, figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also the Lord was crucified. I think this is enough symbol here, enough indication here to what city we might be talking about. It wouldn't be Sodom and Gomorrah, would it? Those have been destroyed or dealt with. But it does sound like a place that we've heard about before. I believe that to be Jerusalem. For 3.5 days, they would be made a public spectacle with every people, tribe, language, and nation looking on. People will celebrate their deaths and send each other gifts, high-fiving each other. Way to go. Glad they're gone. After the 3.5 days were over, God raised them back to life, causing terror among all those who saw them. I'm sure that the expression here being used is that it's the feeling you get when you think you've seen a ghost. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but you ever seen somebody that has that look in their eyes that it looks like they've just seen a ghost? This is describing that feeling or that period of time. And then they're summoned to heaven. They go to where God is. At that very hour, there's a severe earthquake. A tenth of the city collapses, killing 7,000 people. And the survivors were terrified and gave glory to God. And again, we have the marking of time. The second woe is past, the third woe is coming, and the seventh angel now will sound their trumpet. The action of the trumpet, as we have seen in the first 6 trumpets, there's an action, there's an effect. The action is loud voices heard from heaven. Look at verse 15 with me again. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of the Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever. And they fall down in worshiping, saying what we just read in verses 17 through 18. I'll not do that for sake of time. The effect is this. God's temple in heaven was opened, and John saw the Ark of the Covenant accompanied by lightning, rumble, thunder, and earthquake, and severe hailstorm. I'm going to fly back through this again with a little lower bird flying. Instead of the bird's eye view way up high, we're going to bring it down a little bit, okay? But before I do that, let me ask you, as I read this the very first time without even reading all the books that I'm going through and resources on the internet, I could see the sense that we're telling God's story, that we're seeing God's story being told of God bringing through the world the message of a hopeful person that's going to come, and prophets spend their lives and pay with their life talking about this message, and it brings martyrdom. And Jerusalem is where the Lord is crucified. There is a resurrection spoken of here, although it's spoken of as the two olive trees or the two witnesses. They're resurrected. But there's this sense in which this resurrection and this ascension of the two olive trees somehow is allusion to the Lord's death, burial, resurrection, and ascension, to where he's at the right hand of God. And what happens in the temple when Jesus dies on the cross? And is there an earthquake? And does the moon turn like blood? And are there other things that are going on, like peals of lightning, thunders, and earthquakes? And that opening up of the curtain, or the tearing, I shouldn't say open, it's a tear, it's ripping the veil open, right? To now be able to look inside of the Ark of the Covenant, what is the significance of that? Straight access to God, because now a full price has been paid. You don't need to sprinkle blood on the mercy seat anymore. Do you follow that so far? If you're following this without getting caught up in too much of the detail, I think that's why I say don't get locked in on a view, because I think we can't see the forest for all the trees we're trying to look at. And I think in the overall scheme of things, what you're seeing here is full access to God, where before you have that, you have Gentiles that are trampling on the outside of the city that don't get to go in, but now it's opened up for all language and tribe. We're talking about an old covenant presence or era all of a sudden becoming open to all people. So now that all language, all tribes, all people, all nations are open to this access to God. So I think that's the macro view. It's a little bit lower bird's eye view still. Let's go over some of the lower. What about the time references? There are so many different explanations to this. There's no question that we're seeing a synonymous relationship. Not difference, not distinguished times, but same times. Now, if you're a futurist, what does this say? Does anybody have a handle on maybe a premillennial person, a futurist, who would hold to this view? Does 3.5 measure into the dispensational theology at all? It's half a 7. How long of a period is supposed to happen either before, mid, or after the millennium, the 1,000-year reign? The 7-year period. And there are many that believe there's a 3.5-year period, and something happens in another 3.5 year that comes up with 7. So futurists will take this literally. There are other views. I don't know if I can speak to the other views yet, but what I'll do at the end, and you'll get a sheet that will kind of say, here's what the idealists say, here's what the historicists say, here's what the preterists say, here's what the continuous history views say, here's what the futurists say, here's what, whoever says. I'll try to put some of that in there. But I like Tim Pyle's explanation, who's very concise, so few words. He says when you count, take the 3.5 for example. You go 1, 2, 3. What do you expect to come next? 4. But what actually happens is, you fall short of 4. It's a time that might seem long, but it's cut short. He says this best encapsulates the message the recipients need to hear. When you're in the midst of suffering, you're going to think about how long this seems. We talked about this a little bit. The silence for half an hour last week. And we remember the question of the souls of the martyrs under the altar. What's their question? How long? How long will this go on? And that had to do, leading up to the measurement or the seals on the foreheads of the 144,000 to mark out there's many more that's going to join you, and here's how we'll define it. When all that's complete, when that number is complete or fulfilled, then the illusion is that's how long. And here we've got a measuring rod to measure around the temple symbol, right? But it's going to define, here's what defines my people. Now let me ask you a question. Do you think God knows today exactly who all are His? Do you? I don't. I don't think you do, but God does. Right now, if Jesus comes, and it could be at any moment in our lifetime, right? Not prophesying here. It could be. God knows exactly who are His. And whose are His? Those who symbolically have the seal of God marked on their foreheads. Those who symbolically are within the parameters of His covenant relationship. There, the temple, spiritually the temple, the church, in the same way He would know exactly how many people would survive the flood. Who's in the ark? 8 there. I hope there's more than 8 in the kingdom now, right? So I want you to think then in terms of He's answering the same question that's asked from Revelation chapter 5, I believe it was, the martyr souls under the altar. I think it's chapter 5. It's been a while since we've been there. But He's giving us that overall view. So these time references are basically alluded to in Daniel 7:25, 12:14, a time, times, and half a time. So a time would be, in that reference, a year, 2 years, and half a year, 3.5 years. Now realize you're seeing days or you're seeing years. You also realize, and you'll get to this, or you probably have already gotten to this in Daniel, the 70 weeks. Have you gotten to the 70 weeks prophecy yet? The 70 weeks is coming up, and really the weeks there means years. How long was Babylonian captivity going to continue? 70 years. But the symbol is 70 weeks, okay? So just realize in symbol, it's not literal. Don't try to correlate it that way. You'll get all confused. So I think I agree with Piles. It basically denotes a time that will seem long, but it will actually not go on forever. And I think it does have I think it has specific relevance to the early Christians. That the time that they're being persecuted under Rome is really going to seem long. Now, it's not going to be 3.5 years. It's going to be longer. But it's going to seem long, but there will be an end to it. But I also believe it's giving us a picture of how it could relate to us today. How many of you have asked, how much longer, Lord? How many of you have asked that question? And you know, I think that answer that He gave to them for their situation is the same answer He could give of us today. Well, John, it's going to be 1,260 days. Or, you know, Mary, it's going to be 42 months. Or, since you can't count that high, 3.5. I'm sorry. I had to go there. But the idea is it's going to seem long. But there will be an end. And it won't go on forever. I think that best conveys that. Who are the two witnesses? Well, let me hear what y'all say. Who's read anything on this? Does anybody have some suggestions on who these two olive trees or two witnesses are? I know I've kind of created it to where now you're scared to speak. I'm sorry. I don't want to be intimidating here. But actually, did anybody read anything, Karen? Yes. And that's a very plausible interpretation. Uh, huh? On the Mount of Transfiguration, there are two others that appear along with Jesus. I didn't have this in a bullet form, but I mean, it's in bullet form, but it's all there. Backgrounds in Zechariah 4. But they're anointed to serve all the earth. That's from Zechariah. They have power. They become martyrs. They're called prophets. They will come back to life. They ascend to heaven. Some say this is Elijah and Enoch. Based on what fact? Neither one of them physically died. They were taken straight to heaven. Some say they are Moses and Elijah. Why? One had the power to do plagues, which is identified. One had the power to stop rain. Who was that? I got a question. How long had rain stopped? What? What? 3.5 years. Did you hear it? That's a plausible answer in my books. I'm not concluding or dying on that mountain or that hill, but this is a pretty good view of what this might be. And since we're talking about not the time of the, I know it's going to sound like I'm reversing what I just said a while ago. Because I think this is a time reference leading up to prophets being killed and people trying to get rid of anything that was talking about the Messiah and stamping that out. And Satan's trying to thwart that and keep that from happening. He's trying to tempt Jesus in the wilderness. And all this is going on before, up to the time that the temple gets opened up. So I'm thinking we have a description that is before these Christians at Rome, but it's applying to them later that, hey, just in the same way, it seemed long, there was an end to it. It will seem long to you, but there's an end to it. Matthew 5:12. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is following the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. And what has he said? I'm sorry, I kind of took it out of context, but you remember what he's saying? Blessed are you when those who persecute you. For in the same way they did it then. And it's kind of like saying this to the recipients of Revelation. In the same way they did it back then to these prophets who are represented by the two olive trees, and Moses and Elijah were prophets. I mean, I'm not dead set that is who they are literally referring to, but it makes sense that they're a representation of the prophets. Jesus, of course, is a type of Moses, and Elijah, if you remember, one was to come back in the spirit and power of Elijah. That was John the Baptist, who would be the forerunner of Jesus. And these are some of the prophets that were killed, like John the Baptist and others who were killed because of their. Isaiah was killed. If you read Fox's Book of Martyrs, you'll read about some of what tradition says, how these guys were killed. Hebrews 11 describes in the list toward the end of those who were killed. One reference is some were sawn in two. Tradition says that's how Isaiah died. They put him in a hollowed out log and sawed the log in half. You know, not a pleasant way to go. Okay, who is the beast? This beast, I really think, is not necessarily connected to the beast we'll see later tonight. This is a beast who is said to have come from the abyss. Let's go back to where we're introduced to them, to him. Verse 7, the beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower them and kill them. And I believe, some say this is the Antichrist. You're going to get that answer on a lot of these beasts, by the way. Some say this is Nero. Some say this is Domitian. We're not to the referencing yet to where you get the mark of the beast and his number of his name. Some say this is a future individual or institution. I just think it is the overall representation of whoever God might use to to try to thwart God's purpose and God's people, to stamp them out, to get faith out, to get Jesus out of view. And do you think Satan can use people for his purposes today? I don't mean by that he can overpower them and then manipulate them and be in complete control of them, but can he entice them and draw him? And so let me ask you something. Did Satan use Judas? Yes or no? Okay, let me ask you another one. Did Satan use Saul, who later becomes Paul? Yeah, right? To help with his purpose. Now, in the case of Saul, I believe he has free will, and he came to a stop in the road on Damascus, on the way to Damascus, in the bright light, he woke up. He came to Jesus' meeting. That's right. All right, so let's move on to chapter 12. Gets better. John sees what's described as a great sign. Now, I think you need to understand that signs and miracles and wonders are all synonymous in events. But each one of those words, the reason why it takes three words sometimes, signs, wonders, and miracles, is because there's different facets of it that take on meaning. So a sign isn't necessarily just any kind of miracle, but a sign is a miracle that actually points to something. Okay? In the Gospel of John, you don't have the highly saturated miracles like you do in the Gospel of Mark. Guess how many times John uses the word signs in the Gospel of John? How much? 3.5? 7. 7. I think there's some significance to that. Let's read it. Chapter 12. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain, and she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour the child. That moment he was born, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. The period of time that's going to seem long, but there's an end to it. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent, that ancient serpent called the who leads the whole world astray. What did Jesus call him? The father of lies. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down." They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time, in other words, will come to an end. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. We'll come back to that in a moment. If I don't, remind me. You said you'd go back to that. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. Could you agree that this could look like the same thing we just read with different imagery? Is that possible? I think that it is. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, so I reserve that right. But as we look at the highlights, there's this great sign, a woman pregnant, she's in pain, about to give birth. Another sign, in other words, a significant thing to point you to something, and then another significant thing that is to point you to something, or is something that should be well known. It should be right in front of you. You should be able to see this. A sign is something to be seen. That's the idea behind a sign, right? And this other sign is an enormous red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns on its heads. I didn't have the picture. If you'll indulge me for a moment, let's backtrack a little bit. Well, we've seen a lot of slides. Yep. Oh, yep, thank you. I knew that didn't sound right. By the way, that was a picture of the abyss. How far away? You know, there's a quicker way to do this. Sorry. There's a quicker way. I'm sorry for the... There's nothing like dead air on the radio. Sorry for the streamers here. It's not far from down. You saw it, didn't you? Oh, there he is. Let's get that booger up here. Now, later on, it was pointed out to me that there are actually 8 heads, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, just imagine that head's not there. They all have is it 10 horns? And they have crowns. Yeah. I don't know if I see his crown. By the way, first time in Revelation that this word for crown shows up. It's not the Stephanos crown that we've seen earlier given to those who are victors. These are diadems, different Greek word, power of authority, ruler, kingship, dictatorship. That's the kind of crowns that are described in the Greek on this one. Okay. Just a way of looking at that. Let me get back to where we were. Okay, for sake of time, I'm going to let you read the rest of these bullets. I'll see if there's one I need to. Okay, so he's chasing after first of all, he's waiting on the woman to give birth so he can devour the son. The son, when he's born, gets snatched, right, goes back to God. And then what does he do? He pursues the woman who has fled into the wilderness, and he has this current of water coming out of his mouth, spewing out to kind of wash her out. But God opens up the earth, swallows up the water, protects the woman. And now what does he do? He pursues the woman's offspring. Okay. So pursuing the woman's offspring, verse 17, that's what he's left to do. Has he missed his chance on the child? Yeah. Does he think that he has any other chance from that point forward to get to the child. But the child is already protected, right? The child is out of reach. The best next thing he can do now is destroy the followers of the child. Is there any question to who the child is? This is pretty well identifiable. And by the way, there's not really any question to who this dragon is, because it says who he is twice. So the woman, though, sometimes we think about, well, who is this woman? Is it, what did I do? Oh, I blacked out. Okay. Israel was God's people, symbolically described as God's wife. Look at Isaiah 54. For your maker is your husband. How many times do we have God picturing his people as being like a bride? Remember the book of Hosea? He is telling Hosea the prophet to go marry a prostitute so that this prophet named Hosea would experience what it was like to have an unfaithful wife, because God says that's what it feels like from me. Now that's just a big overall and unfair summary of Hosea. You can read that, all 14 chapters. But God is the husbandman, and his people have been seen as his wife, his bride. This woman is said to have been crowned with 12 stars. Does this have any significance with Israel? Yeah, the 12 patriarchs, right? 12 tribes. Through Israel came forth Christ. Israel is the nation from which this one, that Psalm 2 verse 9, is messianically prophesying about as having ruled with an iron scepter. We'll get to that in a moment. So pregnancy is an image also used in the Old Testament of Israel. Micah 4:10, writhe in agony, daughter Zion, that's Israel, like a woman in labor. Let's look at Micah chapter 5, and you'll see a messianic prophecy that is fulfilled in one of the Gospels. Micah chapter 5. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah. Okay. Verses 2. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord and the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. Have you seen that passage before? Isn't that quoted in the Gospels? At least one of them. And so, obviously, we understand, well, that is fulfilling Mary and Joseph going into Bethlehem. But it's a larger portion than just a single virgin woman being identified here. This is all of Israel. You, Bethlehem. Not you, Mary, but Bethlehem, as one that's within all of Israel, will give birth to this child. So who is the dragon? That ancient serpent, devil, Satan, leads the whole world astray, lost his place with God, hurled to the earth. Remember how he wants to be the accuser of God's people? Didn't he try to accuse Job? And there's probably other places we can see where he is an accuser to us today. Who is the child? This is obvious. He's a threat to the dragon, right? Will rule all nations with an iron scepter, snatched up by God to his throne. Now I know he's born, and the dragon's waiting, but he's snatched up, and you're thinking, wait, I thought we had 30 years with him on earth. Well, John's Gospel tells that story of the in-between, the being born and then being ascending into heaven, okay? But Satan's there trying to snatch him, isn't he? Through the Matthew 4 temptations or other ways in which he's trying to tempt Jesus. Psalm 2, I don't know if we should read the, I think we can read this and get on with it. This is the first time I've been kind of worried about time management, but let's get this one in. Psalm 2. I like to start with verse 6. I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. I think this is quoted in Hebrews. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Now that's NIV. The other versions say he will rule with an iron scepter. So it's as a king on a throne with authority, complete authority. When Jesus ascended back to God, as he was ascending, or before he ascended, what did he say to them right after he told them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature? All authority, well, yeah, but he says all authority has been given to me where? On earth and in heaven, okay? All right, chapter 13. Y'all still with me? Let's breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Okay, let's get this one in. And I know you're excited about this one. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea. I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. It had 10 horns, 7 heads, and 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. In other words, can we safely say an agency of the dragon of some sort? Okay? One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast and all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life. And I have to do this. I'm going to pause here and say, or those who've had the seal of God marked on their forehead that's represented by 144,000, or those who are in the measured temple on the inside, okay? The Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world, whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Now, by the way, regardless of the symbols, there's the message. This calls for patience, patient endurance, and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Going back to Revelation 2:10, be faithful unto what? Death, and I'll give you a crown of life. Verse 11, then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forestalled people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom, just like we said a while ago. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is... well, yeah, you said it. I didn't want to say it. It's kind of like that Harry Potter, he who shall not be named, right? Okay, we've got it read. Now you can run for the hills, but I got more. Who's the beast from the sea? Some say Antichrist. A lot of people say Antichrist. Rubel Shelley, in his book, The Lamb and His Enemies, identifies, and I think this is also what Stafford North taught, as well as, I forgot his name, Jim McGuigan, that Rome, as an acting agency, it's imperial Rome as Satan's right-hand man, or right arm, strong arm, the agency to persecute Christians. We know that the dragon is given this thing that seems to be described as an institution. If you look in the text, it seems like he's describing an institution, a machine of sorts, that he's giving that machine power and authority. And it talks about the 10 horns diadems that have power, and these could represent the Caesars, the emperors, very easily represent. And in the counting, from the reference of John's perspective, Nero is one that could be seen as having been slain, but might appear to have been resurrected through the life of Domitian. So that kind of makes sense. Again, let's not get stuck in interpretation just yet, but he's a bad dude that's being used by Satan. It's an agency. It's huge. Who is the beast of the earth that comes up? The beast of the earth, again, Rubel Shelley says, this is probably the priest of the cult. And I would go along and say, yes, the priests of the cult, in other words, if you are not giving allegiance to Caesar, there were people in charge of enforcing it and also acting out injustice, or the wrath of Rome was happening on you. Either to the Colosseum you go, which I don't know if the Colosseum is there, but these parties or these places where they martyr, crucifixions were still taking place. Could it be specifically Nero or specifically Domitian? That could be represented in the first beast with the horns, but it is imperial Rome and the priests who serve in enforcing Rome everywhere else. And that brings me back again to something we said toward the beginning. Why is this letter written to the 7 churches of Asia? That's where the saturation of the shrines to emperors were, outside of Rome itself. It was there. It wasn't in Jerusalem, which makes sense to me as to why we should be dating this book to things that were relevant to these Christians in Rome, not writing to these Christians in Rome about something that was going to happen in Jerusalem before the fall or destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Did you get all that? Okay, we'll come back and kind of wrap that up with a bow. All right. What is the mark of the beast? Is this a clue I'm done? What is the mark of the beast? Per your conversation with me earlier today, Jim, say the word again, Gematria? Gematria. I messed that all. I had not heard this term. I knew about the numerology part. Nero's name, if you take the Hebrew letters that spell out Nero, they will come to a total of 666. Thank you. Well, I kind of went down this rabbit hole some. Go ahead. Okay. And so these have number equivalences, and that totals to 666. Mixed reviews on this. Charagma. Okay, I still haven't heard of that word, though. So it's not your fault. I just was ignorant of that. All right, so real quick, mixed reviews on this. There are a lot of names I found out, by the way, that either using Hebrew alphabet or Greek alphabet, you have adding up letters can come to 666. Muhammad, in Greek letters, is the equivalent of 666. So there's also some ancient texts that are even older say it's not 666, it's actually 616. But I'm not enough to say I can lean one way or the other on it. Some say, okay, Nero, or if it's Not Nero literally, it's the personification of Nero into Domitian. That 666 could be the beast that comes from the earth. Okay. Futurist view. This is our dispensationalist. It's a microchip implanted in you when you got your vaccination. I'm just saying it, okay? Or it used to be a barcode. I think that will probably get converted to a QR code. Those are more popular. It's some physical mark for you to do commerce. So it's your money currency system or something like that is the mark of the beast. COVID-driven interpretations, it doesn't have a lot of support to it, but there's some out there that it's whether you've been vaxxed or if you wear a mask, and that's the mark of the beast. It's something that's visible. Okay, that's a futurist view. A preterist view is it's the stamped image on of the emperor on a coin, okay, that you could have in your right hand. And what's a coin have? A head and a tail, right? That's a pretty good view. I kind of like that idea that, okay, it may be in that may be what he's referring to. The idealist says, there's so many that could come up to 666. It's probably not anybody individually. It's just a representation that if 7 represents God, and if 3 sevens is the magnitude of God's presence and awesomeness and whatever, 666 just shows it's falling short of it, that it's evil being lesser than good. Historist view, the evolution of the Ten Commandment-driven observance of the Sabbath into a Sunday worship. As a matter of fact, Seventh-day Adventists believe the mark of the beast, not the number, by the way, but the mark of the beast is the endorsement of sacred Sundays or Sunday sacredness, and that the number is the Pope. That 666 is the Pope that led that evolution from Sabbath to Sunday. Okay. I'm going to clean this up. We're done. Just added 2 more slides. Okay, we got through those. Write your questions down, by the way. If you don't write them down, you'll forget them, but we're going to try to answer all questions that we can when we get to the last part of the quarter. But next week is Chapter 14, there's only one chapter, but it's a doozy. Let me stop streaming.